First, start by telling me the work you do for Clemson.
Yes, I'm the state vegetable pathologist, so I'm responsible for research and extension on vegetable diseases. Okay. So most of my research deals with how to control diseases better, and then the extension part is educating growers and other people in the community about my research and the new findings.
And what type of research for diseases that you do specifically? Like what disease do you specifically cover?
My main focus has been cucurbit diseases or vine crops diseases, especially watermelons. The two main diseases I've worked on are gummy stem blight, which I think is the disease I'm probably best known for. Because there are not a lot of other people working on that disease, and it can be quite severe on watermelon and muskmelon when we get a lot of rain, like we've just had recently. The other disease is fusarium wilt of watermelon, which there aren't a lot of control options for growers right now.
Okay, and can you tell me about what first got you interested in a career as a plant pathologist?
Yes, I was a botany major as an undergraduate because I've always enjoyed working with plants. But when I was a sophomore, I got tired of working in the dining hall and looked for a lab job. And I got a job in a plant pathology lab. And that is what got me into the field of plant pathology.
And what university did you go to?
That was at Michigan State University.
And once you left Michigan, did you pursue educational interest in other colleges?
Yes. I left Michigan State to go to Cornell University, where I spent 6 years there getting both a master's and a doctorate in plant pathology.
Okay, and can you explain the process of creating resistant varieties of cucurbits and other crops?
Yes. And let's use the example of powdery cucurbits resistant to powdery mildew, because that work was actually done at Cornell. They found some wild cucurbits, one of which came from the south. It was called Cucurbita okeechobensis from the Okeechobee swamp that did not get powdery mildew. And so they crossed this wild cucurbit with edible cucurbits, different types of pumpkins and squash, to transfer the resistant genes from the wild cucurbit to the edible cucurbit. And then of course they kept crossing it to the edible cucurbit so that the fruit would again look and taste like the pumpkins and squash that we like to eat.
How long does it typically take?
That process took at least 10 to 15 years. It just takes time, and even now seed companies will generally during the winter they'll either send their seed to someplace in the southern hemisphere where it can be grown outside when it's winter up here, or they will do tests in the greenhouse. So they're really trying to do 2 cycles per year instead of in the past they only did 1 cycle per year just to speed things up. But in general, what I've heard is that from when a resistant plant is discovered, if you're going to try and breed that resistance into a related plant, it takes at least 10 years before the consumer is going to be able to buy the seeds of the resistant variety.
Okay, and with the years of work in disease management, what advice can you give to homeowners about controlling diseases in their own yard?
Probably the first thing is just to check your plants at least once a week, so you know what's going on. Especially like sometimes I forget to walk around, the side of your house that normally you don't go on because of the opposite side from the garage. Check your plants so you can be aware of what's going on with them. Try to provide plants with as much sunshine as possible, unless it's a shade-tolerant cultivar or plant. But sunshine reduces the amount of disease that you see on plants. Use drip irrigation instead of overhead irrigation. Don't use the hose to sprinkle your plants with water, because anytime the leaves stay wet, you're going to have more disease problems.
Okay, and when you say the main things you should look out for is moisture and temperature control?
Yes, and it's generally easier to control moisture than it is to control temperature.
Okay, and You also write for the Post and Courier, right?
Yes, I do.
What type of literature do you generally publish so that you can educate homeowners?
I like to write about plants that I have grown myself. I like to sort of share my own gardening experiences, mostly positive but sometimes negative, with the general public, so that people can really learn from someone who's been gardening here in the Low Country, what works here in the Low Country. Having information relevant to our environment, I guess, is really the focus of the articles that I write.
Okay, and in your time spent as a plant pathologist, what do you see as your lasting legacy?
Well, I would hope that it would be my work on gummy stem blight, because I am one of the leading researchers in that field. We've documented development of resistance to different pesticides, but we've also been able to find or test and recommend new fungicides that work in place of the old ones. I've also started to look at comparing susceptibility of a lot of different types of cucurbits to see which ones are more susceptible, and that means need to be treated with fungicides, but other ones that are less susceptible and probably don't need to be treated with fungicides. And I'm going to expand this work in the next couple of years to look at tropical types of cucurbits. So we don't necessarily grow here, but possibly if our growing season is lengthened because of climate change, that we may be able to produce some of these as different types of crops that can be grown here as well.
Okay, you mentioned climate change. Is that a persistent problem that you may be seeing along crop production in years to come?
It seems like it will be, yes.
Okay, Dr. Keinath, I'd like to thank you again for the interview. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.